What's up, YouTube family? It's your girl Alex coming to you on a Friday afternoon, or evening rather, because it's like 6 o'clock. I had a idea that was piggybacking on a lot of the financial literacy topics that we've discussed thus far, and it was pertaining to my experience with a startup business versus a franchise. And I think it's important to weigh the pros and cons because they're very different in a lot of ways. Some similarities, but some huge differences as it relates to, you deciding what you want to do as it relates to entrepreneurship. So I want to cover that. I want to talk about it. And I would definitely love to hear some of your experiences with either business model, whether you've had a startup or whether you've had a franchise, and just have some open, candid discussion about what was your experience with both and which one you recommend over the other. So first, I want to start the conversation with focusing on some of the pros and cons of startups, and talk a little bit about my experience with the startup and just start there. So I started my first official registered business, I'll say federally and state registered business, in 2014. And the focus of the business was health education and wellness. And so with that, my background is in public health. I may have mentioned that before now, maybe not. But my background is in public health. So I created a business that was focused on health education and doing consulting services for health and wellness. And so with that, the idea, it came quite naturally with my background and my, experience and interest in health and wellness. But the biggest thing was, educationally, my experience with programmatic public health and, developing public health programs and implementing and executing and evaluating all of that good stuff that is not relevant. But as it related back to the startup, a lot of those things I knew how to do already, and I was capable of doing already. And so with that, though, taking it into a business capacity is a lot different than being an employee that does the same thing, especially when you're talking about an independent startup. So I'll say in that experience, as it relates to just about everything, you're the marketer, you're the accountant, you're the employee, you're the brainchild, the innovator, the customer service person. And so, so with that, I created a logo. Well, I had a friend. I had a friend help me with the logo, and I got it trademarked. And so that was an administrative process in itself. Just negotiating contracts and, getting good contracts and making sure that, legally covered contracts. That was a piece that I had to, figure out on my own with resources, of course, but it was a labor intensive process when you talk about being the person that's also providing the service on top of just, making sure you're administratively covered. I will say the benefit for me was, working independently, being an entrepreneur, providing a service that you're, skilled at providing and that you're knowledgeable of providing, and then being able to negotiate your pricing, negotiating those relationships, networking. And so I could say negotiating relationships and networking, they can be a pro and a con because, a lot of it is a business of, when it comes to independent, I know personally, I can't speak for everybody, but I know personally, I do business with people that I like, especially when you talk about small business. So, Walmart doesn't have a face really, Kroger or, Publix doesn't necessarily have a face, although they have a brand. They don't have an individual face. And so when you're talking about being a solopreneur in that regard, you're the brand and the face all at the same time. And so in a lot of ways that can work to your benefit. If you're a likable person, that can be easy. But if you may be shy or, networking is not, your forte, it may be a little bit more difficult to do that. And so I consider myself an extroverted introvert. I like talking to people. I'm good at talking to people. I'm good at building rapport and building relationships, but it's exhausting. It takes a conscious effort. And so I know that about myself. And so another piece with that, like I said, goes back to the marketing, creating your marketing material. Of course, you can always hire somebody to do that, but starting out, you might not be financially equipped to be able to do that. And then also having a marketing plan and a marketing strategy, it's one thing to have marketing materials, but then it's another thing to how you're going to get it out there. Yeah, social media, is very helpful with marketing, but there are other mechanisms and platforms that are also useful when it comes to marketing. So just navigating that and figuring that out, and possibly having to hire someone that has a specialty in marketing would be something that you have to consider. So it's just a lot of those, it's a lot of those small big things. I say small big things because on the front end, I know for me, I think about operating the business. Like, that was my goal, was to be a health educator, to be a health consultant. I don't care about all that other stuff. And so as it relates to that, you have to just determine, do you want to wear a lot of hats, or do you want to trust someone else with your dream, with your passion, with, and do they have the same level of ambition and tenacity and focus that you do for something that you created? And so it's a lot of considerations when you're talking about going into a solopreneurship without a lot of direction. With mostly just an idea and a know-how. In those instances, I'll say that mentorship is super important. A business advisor, so you can, because the finances matter as well. So just kind of juggling all those things makes a difference when you're talking about a startup business. And the make or break is a little bit different. And you have to create your own support system. I'll say that. You have to find your own support system when you're talking about a startup. Not unless you're doing it with a group of friends and you all are partners in the business. But even still, again, everybody's, focus level may not be the same. So that's something you definitely have to consider, even with going into partnerships with startups. People do it and they're successful at it all the time. So I'm not saying that it can't happen. It definitely can happen. It's just, it will take a little bit of energy to make sure you have that circle and that support in the way that you need it to be successful. I guess I'll say that. And so I know, like I said, personally for me, with my startup, I had some like-minded people in my circle, not necessarily that were as focused on the health and wellness, but that I could, contract to do other specific things, like marketing material, or like coming up with verbiage for this, or like coming up with logos. And so, you're developing your own team. You literally are developing your own team. And so if you're capable of doing that, like I said, people do it every day and they're successful at it. It definitely just takes a strategy and to just have order. I'll say order. So I will say that currently I am operating a franchise business where I am the owner of this particular business. And I'll say that the emphasis is pest control. And so this process has been, I will say, a lot different than the startup route. And so with this, wasn't my idea. It wasn't even an industry that I thought I would transition into. It was literally something that was best fit for the business model, as well as kind of how I saw my life set up as an entrepreneur, if that makes sense. And it's an industry that has a lot of growth potential that isn't necessarily super saturated, and it's something that is a niche that is an ongoing need. And so, kind of a little backstory as it relates to identifying the specific franchise. I went through a franchise broker, where essentially, you work with them over non-specified amount of time where you all get to know each other. It's like you're dating. And the purpose of this date is for your franchise broker to get to know a little bit about you. And in that process, they start introducing you to different franchises that could possibly be a good fit for the things that you say that you value as it relates to business opportunities, but also the life that you want to kind of live, that like it's matching a lot of things, values, interest, capabilities, and it's matching a lot of different things. So in that process of interviewing, I know for me with a franchise broker, we worked together for about May to October. And so with that, I went on a lot of what I call speed dates with a lot of different franchises, getting to know kind of how their business is set up, the model that they use, as well as kind of some of their focus points, the level of support that they do or don't have, just a whole lot of things that were a part of that consideration. So as I went on what I call these speed dates with these various franchises and their franchise developer, franchise managers, whoever, and got to learn more about each company. And of course, the financial piece was a part of it. Franchises have a cost because at the end of the day, you are buying into a system where you are given the right to use their trademarks that they've paid for. You also have a support team that's kind of embedded. So you have people that are hired to help you win. You have people that, business advisors and things that are already embedded. You have marketing already set up. You have business advisors. You have material you can already use. And at that point, you become the operator of the business. So an example I'll give is, Auntie Annie's Pretzel. Every time you go to Auntie Annie's Pretzel, their franchises, they might have a couple corporate locations. I think they do. I researched it, but I know that they have a ton of franchises. But whenever you go to any Auntie Annie's, they all look the same, right? You can't tell who the owner is. You don't see their face, not unless they happen to be in there working and introduce themselves and say, hi, I'm the owner. But they have a signature brand where no person necessarily is the face of the business. Even though I will say Auntie Annie's, the actual business was actually sold from a lady that was the face of the business at one point, because she was an individual business that sold the business and then they grew to be franchises, XYZ. But essentially, as we know Auntie Annie's today, it's a faceless business. And we associate Auntie Annie's with pretzels, not people, right? And so for me, that's a big distinction I make between being a startup and a franchise, is that you're not the face of that business, because that business model existed before you, and maybe it will exist after you, after you decide to sell or do whatever. And so to me, that is a benefit in a lot of ways, because I know for me personally, I didn't want to be a part of a business where it was based on how people felt about me personally. Big focus for me, with moving into the franchise realm, was providing a service that's a niche and a service that people already want, whether I offer it or not. And so that was a huge consideration for me. And that was a big part of what I told my franchise broker. Like, I don't want to be in the business of the heart or the business of the emotion. I want the business of I need it now, of gratification. Selling an experience, selling a service, providing something that, despite how you feel about me or despite whether you even know who I am, you need the service. And so that was a big determining factor for me. So I'll say, going through the process, like I said, the team is already existing. There's a marketing team where they're responsible for, outputting marketing material. Like I said, you have access to logos and other marketing templates, to where you're not reinventing the wheel or just inventing the wheel. Because I will say, in startup world, there are a lot of wheels that you are inventing, because it's your business, it's your dream. It has to look the way that you want it to look. Meanwhile, in the franchise realm, this wheel already exists, and it just like, you just kind of, you're figuring out where you want to apply it. Now, I will counter that and say that with franchises, there are rules of things you can and can't do, because at the end of the day, you are an extension of this brand. So you have to make sure you represent this brand in a favorable way, that they would approve of in a lot of ways. So, you're in this contract where there are certain rules or policies and procedures, or however you want to refer to it, that you also have to uphold on your side. So, and there's some on their sides too. There are certain obligations that franchisor has to you and you have to them. So the level of accountability may be a little different as it relates to a startup, because in a startup, you're responsible for yourself, right? And how you conduct yourself is on you. And of course, if you have investors and things, that changes that. But I just mean just a basic startup where you started the business with your money, your idea, your everything, and you're 100% owner. You decide what that looks like. But on the franchise realm, you have to decide, do you want people dictating how and when and the way that you operate? So for me, moving into franchising, I decided that I was okay with having the rules, because I also wanted the support that came with the rules. I wanted the team that came with the rules. And, to add more, I know the franchise that I'm a part of, we have a business advisor. So, you're able to talk about the financial piece, the operational piece, the marketing piece, the customer service piece, the IT piece. Another huge thing. So when I, web presence is super big with businesses. So like, even when I talk about the startup, I had to make my own website. I did it because I've done website development before, like long ago. So it was still very much labor intensive. Like, I'm not a Microsoft, Google IT person or anything by any stretch of the word, but I was able to successfully accomplish it on my own. However, on the franchise side, they develop your website for you. They set up all your, a lot of your traffic as it relates to all these different, SEOs and all of that stuff that drives traffic in your direction, that you would otherwise have to, kind of have boots on the ground, grassroots efforts to get on your own. Now, mind you, I have employees, and so I do task those employees with doing some of that groundwork as far as, canvassing and marketing, and not in an aggressive salesy way, because I didn't hire them to be people, and so they may not be comfortable with that. But for me, I tie it into that customer service piece where you're not necessarily selling them on it, but you are educating them on it. And that presents a different opportunity to connect with potential customers. And then furthermore, I wanted a business system that was easily teachable, learnable, and teachable. So when I say I have employees in my startup, I had people that I worked with as it relates to like contractors, but I did not have any employees. And so now, being able to have employees, I'm able to kind of, delegate a lot of tasks to where now I'm overseeing in a, management operational standpoint, as opposed to also trying to do the job too, because that can become stressful, having to trying to do everything. And so now, I've been able to develop, there's that embedded team that I kind of told you about with franchising, but then I'm able to develop my employee team that is also responsible for certain things. And so, just kind of bringing it back full circle, I'll say that, if we ran down our pros and cons list, startup pros would be, independence, autonomy, innovation, dictating your schedule, and growing at the rate that you want to grow at. If I was to say the cons on the startup, I would say autonomy, growth at a rate that you can't always control. So the thing is, a lot of the things that they can go either way, because a lot of the things that can be pros about a startup, on the worst side of the spectrum, it can be a con, right? And the same thing with the startup. The things that are, when it's working to your benefit, it's a benefit. And when it's not, it could be considered as a con. So really, I wrap that up to say that it really depends on what you want to do. And it depends on how you want to operate and how you see your life, So like, I think last week, I was out of town for the whole week. And so I left my operations coordinator in charge the whole week. Now, granted, I have, different, technology in place to where I can still have some oversight, but if something went left, I wasn't in town, you know. And so, you know, he knew I was going to be out of town, of course. You know, the communication is important. And so I said, you know, you're going to be on your own this week for the most part, but I'll be available, you know, via phone. And so he had to, you know, he held it down for the week while I was gone. And granted, you know, he does that even when I'm in town for the most part. But, you know, I'm able to be more hands-on when I'm physically present. And that's my intent. Meanwhile, like with the same startup business that I developed, that wouldn't have been possible. It wouldn't have been possible. For one, the overhead would have been too expensive. But also, and the overhead would have been too expensive because there's a certain specialty that comes with that. You know, so if you're having someone that replaces you at that high of a level, you have to compensate them accordingly. And so that's the thing about when you get into a franchise business, as my franchise broker described it, it's a business in a box. And so really it doesn't matter who buys the box. The business is the same in that box. And so it gives you the tools you need to replicate that business without this certain level of specialty that, depending on your startup, you may be the it factor for that startup. So if you're not present, how's it working? You know? And so with the franchise I'm a part of, I'm not the it factor. You know, I'm an important factor, but I'm not by no means the it factor. I could teach anyone what I do at an administrative level. It would take some time for sure, but there's not an educational disparity that's required. There's not any kind of, you know, there's nothing. I mean, granted, I am state certified for the actual chemicals we use, but, you know, outside of that, there's very little learning curve in terms of someone else, some random Joe Blow being able to accomplish and be successful at the same thing, you know, with the right amount of tenacity and dedication for sure. They're capable, but overall, like, those are some of the stark differences, I guess I'll say, between startup and franchise. Again, this is entirely opinion based on my experience, but I am definitely interested to see, you know, you all's experience. Because like I said, I know a lot of small business owners follow and comment and things, so I'm super excited about that. So I definitely want to hear more about your experience with either a startup or a franchise. And then too, what made you choose one business model over the other? Because I mean, you know, they're different. And then tell me what you're doing now and what you want to do in the future. So I look forward to speaking with you. If you found this video useful, a like would be appreciated. If you would like to see more content of this nature, a subscribe would be great. And if you know someone that could benefit from this information, a share would be amazing. So I look forward to speaking to you next time, and thanks for joining me. Have a good weekend.